Winter is right around the corner. Now, Jeeps are super capable right out of the box, but there are definitely some things that you can do to optimize your experience and your Jeep come this snowy season. You'll notice I got the shades on. I had corrective eye surgery recently. You could say I'm blocking out the haters. Either way, still going to be a good video, and we're going to be talking about all that winter prep necessary for you and your Jeep. The first thing that I'll share with you seems kind of simple, and maybe all these will seem a little, straightforward, but, figure them out as they are applicable to you, is to check your fluids. So you're going to be looking at your antifreeze, your windshield washer fluid, checking your oil, checking your transmission fluid, and checking those differentials. As the old adage goes, if it's leaking oil, it at least has oil in it. That's cool. But when it comes to winter, we want to make sure that as much of that oil or winter fluid as necessary is in the appropriate reservoir. So what do I mean by that? Well, windshield washer fluid specifically has a temperature rating. The farther north where the weather is worse and the temperatures are colder, you're going to want to ensure that you have a windshield washer fluid that is in fact rated for the area that you live and the temperatures that you're going to get. There are some key components, and manufacturers are going to be the people who establish what those ratings are. But realistically, that's something you should be cognizant of, so that when it gets all schmutzy on your windshield, you're able to and wipe it all off. Now, move on to antifreeze. Antifreeze is actually pretty similar. If you are going to be supplementing it, we do recommend that you either get, some good quality OE derivative antifreeze. So that means exactly what Big Daddy Chrysler had suggested for us. Not all antifreezes are created equal. Just like windshield washer fluids or oils or any of these fluids that we're talking about. You have to have some consumer responsibility in the process. Additionally, when it comes to engine oils, transmission fluids, and differential fluids, here's the big thing. When components get really, really cold, you can imagine, and your hands have gotten cold, your nose has gotten cold, your ears have gotten cold at some point in time in your life, they just don't want to work as well. So having appropriate lubricity within those components with the oils that they're supposed to have is critical. So when you're doing your routine, get ready for winter checklist, make sure that you're checking through all of your fluids. Now, when it comes to our modern tech-inspired power plants, stick with the manufactured recommended viscosities of your oil. So if that's 5W20 or 0W20, stay the course and top off with whatever is recommended by your owner's manual. That's like the worst feeling when it's cold and it's blustery and you just got done shopping at the mall or the Walmart or wherever you were at, and you go out to jump in your vehicle and just nobody's home. All right, so this is so incredibly simple. There is just like every automotive box store in the nation wants to sell you a battery, right? And because they want to sell you a battery, that's just an easy sell for them. They will test your battery for free. So while I believe that you could go out there with a multimeter and you could buy a battery tester at any, reputable place and, test your load capacity of your battery, you could also just cruise up to your favorite auto parts box store and ask them to test your battery. And what you're looking for is cold cranking amps, or CCA. It's so important that with our heightened electrical needs of our vehicles, that you have a good fully charged battery to run your Jeep. Get out there, go to that local box store, get that measurement. If you have trouble reading it or have a hard time understanding whether or not your battery absolutely needs to be replaced, you can go to a trusted off-road shop around you, or you're welcome to reach out to us through our channel or through sfj4x4.com, and we'll kind of help you understand if your battery is good, if it needs replaced, and what are the unintended consequences if you don't. This is the time to switch your summer air for your winter air in your tires. All right, that's obviously not true at all. But there is absolutely a difference in how tires perform when temperatures decrease and the density of the air changes. So in the summer, all of that hot, warm air, the friction molecules are moving all around and things are expanding and everybody is happy and moving and grooving inside and on the tires. When I say on, I mean the actual rubber compound that the tires are made of itself. When I say in, I do in fact mean the air. Now, this is specifically about your standard compressed shop air, not nitrogen-filled tires or anything else. Specifically just your standard filled it up at the gas station situation. Now, the debate sort of rages on of should you raise your air pressure or lower it in the winter, and I'll address that here in a second. But some really classically important things to know in this process is cold, dense air is going to register lower within your tire pressure monitoring system. That means that you could have had the same 30 psi in your tires in the summer, and as you move into the winter and colder months, now that 30 psi, as those molecules kind of suck up next to each other, it's actually going to be more like 28 or 29 psi. Now, it's realistically just a thermodynamic property. Nothing has actually changed. We get a lot of questions about that, and people are concerned that they have, the tires are leaking down, or they've, curbed their wheel and now it's broken the bead or something to the effect. It's just the nature of the temperature change. Pump up a little extra air when it comes to cold air pressure fill up so that you get back to your desired PSI that you want to operate at. It is potentially recommended to be another 1 to 3 PSI higher. Now, the argument there is the fact that when you have a wider, flatter footprint in the snow, sleet, ice, all that kind of stuff, the tire will actually float on top, losing contact and therefore losing control as you traverse the terrain. So if you're going to be traveling more speed and road use, you may actually want to run a little more air pressure so that you have a narrower actual contact patch and it kind of cuts through the snow and the inclement stuff on the ground between you and the road. Now, if you're doing some cool off-road wheeling, you may actually find that you want, for light, fluffy snow, to run wider, flatter tires. You're still airing down in that situation. That's okay. Now, when it comes to tires, and this is kind of the age-old question, should I be running a winter tire? Should I be running an all-terrain? Can I be running a mud terrain or something in the middle? And it's pretty challenging because honestly, you ask 1,000 people, you're going to get 1,000 different answers. And quite frankly, we've all been having the same conversation for decades at this point. I do want to say that a good all-terrain tire will realistically perform swimmingly for the majority of people and the bell curve of utilization. Typically, mud terrain tires that have less bites and sipes on them do not perform well in winter conditions. All-terrains are kind of, king of the hill. I don't feel like you need to switch to a winter tire if you have all-terrains on your vehicle. If you have more of a unibody-inspired Jeep platform vehicle, feel free to switch to winters. That way, maybe if you're a little lower to the ground, or, the four-wheel drive system works a little bit differently than our bigger platform Jeeps, now maybe that tire will actually give you some advantage. When it comes to other types of traction aids, traction boards are obviously a good idea if you think that you're going to get in a situation where you could get stuck. Traction boards will obviously help you get out of, maybe a snowbank that you've gotten high centered in. Additionally, if you have a tire that spins all the way through and gets down to some icy surface, you may be able to utilize the traction board, to try and gain some traction in that ice slick situation. Now, the old school technology that is a little more cumbersome is tire chains. Specifically, chains and then cables are not really a technology that you see as widely consumed as they once were. There's actually a time and a place for chains and cables. Usually, if you are really on the unbeaten path, you're not going to go on any highways or any state-maintained routes, chains and cables aren't a bad option. Cables became very popular because they were trying to create a stepping stone to make that kind of traction aid useful for those state routes or those highway situations. They never really worked super well. But chains are, again, they're more cumbersome. They wrap around the tire. You have to use some tension to retain them to the tire wheel itself. And they work incredibly well, and they're super cool. And you think you're a big truck driver of the heyday of trucking across America, but realistically, they don't have a place for most of our modern day vehicles. Check your four-wheel drive engagement systems. There is no shame in the game if you go out there and just shift your vehicle into four-wheel drive and make sure that it functions. I know it sounds incredibly rudimentary, and if you are an off-roader, you're like, man, I live in four-wheel drive. Cool, good for you. But we have professionally gotten so many calls between the first couple snows of the year that people call in and they complain that they go to shift and the four-wheel drive doesn't appear to be functioning. In fact, sometimes the handle is just flopping around loosey-goosey. And what ends up happening with a myriad of Jeep-specific platforms, when that shift lever is not appropriately lubricated or used with frequency, things start to kind of bind and rust into place and they get all stuck. And so then you start yanking on it and bam, there's these little plastic bushings and they exit the chat and you are stuck wiggling a shifter around with no four-wheel drive engagement. We're seeing it all the time. In fact, we were just wheeling recently and there was a JK Wrangler and they were shifting in and out of 4 high and 4 low and two-wheel drive. And then all of a sudden, nobody was home because the little bushing, the little clip, the cable itself, there's a number of things there that can actually go wrong. And boom, you are out of luck and without four-wheel drive. It would be better to know about that now than later when you really, really need it. So go out there, check it. If you do have one of the older platforms and you can see those clips, feel free to spray some appropriate lubricant on there. We utilize fluid film. There's a number of products, so long as they're non-petroleum and they're not a lithium-based product, typically they're gonna be okay for short-term use on those bushings and cables. Realistically, you just wanna make sure that those components move fluidly. Additionally, it circles back to when we checked our fluids, sometimes there are people who are not using their four-wheel drive engagement kind of ever, and that's okay. I mean, you should go off-roading, but maybe you don't, and you know, I support you, but you go to shift into four-wheel drive for the first time in a very long time, and if there's an insufficient amount of fluid in the transfer case, there's a good chance you could burn up your entire transfer case as well. So this is ensuring that your four-wheel drive engagement system is functioning appropriately. So winter prep is not just about the mechanics of the vehicle or the fluids or your familiarity with the four-wheel drive system, but it is also very, very much about surviving. Now, we absolutely take this for granted in the world that we live, in the age that we live, with the hyperconnectivity that we have with our cellular devices and our satellite internet and the ability to GPS locate someone or something that it feels like all the time. But there are often times that is not the case. And still, by today's standards, there are people who get off the road in a blizzard. These can be very serious and potentially dangerous situations. And you have to be prepared to survive. I take this situation and this topic part very seriously because there's been a number of people, especially when it comes to winter wheeling, who have passed away. And I want desperately, if you have nothing else that comes away from this video, is hopefully that somebody here watching this will take that into consideration and avoid some big costly mistakes. Make sure that you have some type of emergency kit on board of your rig, whether that includes some water, some snacks, an emergency blanket, flares, whatever it might be. Make sure that you have an appropriate emergency kit. You will likely also really want to make sure that you have some form of recovery kit. Now that could be something as simple as an appropriate tow rope or traction boards as mentioned before. It could be a shovel, some basic hand tools, things that should you find yourself in a hairy predicament that you can at least attempt to set yourself up for success. In the worst case scenarios, if you can have extra layers and a winter blanket with you, that would be absolutely ideal. You want to avoid running the vehicle with the windows up and the tailpipe plugged. You don't know if it's plugged, so err on the side of caution and assume that it is, that snow is packed up in there or it's below the water or whatever. Unfortunately, you're just going to have to deal with the cold. The number one cause of harm and morbidity is asphyxiation or death by inhaling exhaust fumes. This is a super common thing, and unfortunately, we've lost some off-roaders in the past to this, and absolutely, through some of the nasty blizzards in recent history, we have been exposed to this as well. If you do find yourself in a situation where the vehicle is off and the snow is coming down, do your best to make sure that that vehicle is off the road, not so far off in a ditch or in a berm where somebody won't see it, but also not so close to the road that if somebody has impaired visibility because of the winter weather, that they hit you. And these are really dicey situations. And unfortunately, I feel like they're things that we shouldn't have to mention, but people are still dying because of these situations, and we don't want that for you. On a more happy note, this is also a time where people absolutely love to go out and play recovery. You get to be the Matt's Off-Road Recovery of the North, and that is awesome. But it's important to note that there is both some ethical and legal conversations to be had around doing recoveries as an independent or just an individual out on the road. As far as the legal side of things, there is definitely ramifications if there is a driving ban, because if you get stuck, then you're actually taking precious resources from the professional tow truck recovery, first responders, so on and so forth. Additionally, there is the legal ramifications when it comes to recovering an individual. If you're hooking onto them and you rip their bumper off, who then is responsible for that damage to their vehicle? Sometimes where you have to set up to winch, pull, snatch, drag, do whatever, you could actually put yourself in harm's way when it comes to other traffic that may or may not see you. And so it could be a safety issue with that as far as that's concerned. Typically, Jeep and off-road people love recovering other folks, and that is cool. And I'm here for it. If you want to go out and you want to be the next recovery artist, have at it. I have no qualms with that. I'm not encouraging you. I'm not condoning it. But I do absolutely know that I enjoy doing it at a previous point in my life as well. But ensure that when you're doing it, that whoever you're recovering, you guys are on the same page. If you're charging for it, you're charging a fair to nominal fee, because quite frankly, you're not a licensed, insured, secured person doing it. So if you're doing it, you're strictly doing it for fun, and you have to communicate that upfront when offering to assist somebody else in that moment. So if you are not that fully over-the-top, kitted out, ready to self-recover vehicle, then you should probably invest in roadside assistance or recovery. Now understand that when there are blizzards, when there are less than desirable climactic events, those roadside assistance companies are absolutely tapped. They're maxed out. But if you're willing to be patient and work within the confines of what your policy or plan states, then they will show up for you 9 times out of 10. And that will be the safest, best option for the majority of vehicle owners. There are aspects of the automotive industry that are absolutely dedicated to research, design, and development of products specifically around optimizing you as the driver and your vehicle in the winter months. And so understand that this little video can't touch on everything, but we hope that we've brought up some decent talking points, made you think about some things. You go outside and you test that four-wheel drive system before you're stranded. I hope that this video is helpful. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can get notified of more awesome Jeep off-road and automotive content in the future.